But also, a lot of people feel like he was targeted unfairly by political opponents and prosecuted for it. And that's just like unfair. It's an un-American value. And I think that people started to warm to him and felt like this guy was truly under attack, and they wanted to see the comeback kid.
Hello and welcome to the Americana Show. I'm Kate Andrews, your guest host this week, and I'm joined by Rick MacArthur, who is the publisher of Harper's Magazine and a contributor to The Spectator, and also by Sarah Elliott, who is a spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK. Hi both, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We have just heard Donald Trump's victory speech, which he delivered in Florida. We're going to play you some clips now. Here he is thanking the American people, listing off many of the states that he feels won him this victory.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again. And in addition to having won the battleground states of North Carolina, I love these places, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, we are now winning in Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and Alaska, which would result in us carrying at least 315 electoral votes.
And there's no doubt that Donald Trump is delighted to be set to win the popular vote, something he did not achieve in 2016. Here he is talking about that now.
Winning the popular vote was very nice, I will tell you. It's a great feeling of love. We have a great feeling of love in this very large room with unbelievable people standing by my side. These people have been incredible. They've made the journey with me, and we're going to make you very happy. We're going to make you very proud of your vote. I hope that you're going to be looking back someday and say that was one of the truly important moments of my life when I voted for this group of people. Beyond.
Sarah, I want to come to you first. Let's stick on President Trump's victory speech. We should say at the time of recording, Fox News has called this election. Other broadcasters like CNN and NBC have not called it yet, although they have called Pennsylvania. They're calling some of those key swing states, and it does very much indeed look like Donald Trump has not just won the presidency, he's won in a landslide. His speech put a lot of emphasis on the American people, a lot of emphasis on himself and his family, but indeed how much he was grateful to the American people. Talk us through it.
Well, he was a very humble Trump, I would say. He very gracious. He had his entire family and campaign team on the stage. And the first thing I noticed was that Barron was definitely a different size from where he was 8 years ago. I think he's 6'9" now. But he really called out his family and his children by name, highlighted his wife and her best-selling book, and had different campaign staffers give shout-outs. And he said, promises made, promises delivered. It's now time to work for the American people. And I think he was calmer. Maybe it's his age. Maybe he's tired, I would think at this point. But it was a very kind of sober, reflective, and positive, and dare I say, presidential speech for Donald Trump.
Rick, Trump talked a lot about what a remarkable win this was, given the fact that he did not win in 2020. Not a point that he made so explicitly, but he talked about how he was the 45th and 47th president of the United States. Love him or loathe him, there is no way to doubt, really, that this will be a contender for the comeback of the century.
Yeah, he's the second coming of Grover Cleveland. I guess he was the only other president who skipped terms or was elected twice with a term in between, or more than one term in between. And I also, by the way, I believe the Fox result because I know Arnon Mishkin, their analyst statistician, and he's the one who called Arizona for Biden in 2020 and broke Trump's back. Basically, that was the end of that was the decisive call, and Fox made the call. So I think he's very good and he's very accurate. So, but I don't have any strong feelings about his comeback of the year. I think it's more a commentary on the bankruptcy of the Democratic Party. I mean, I think that's why he won. I mean, it's extraordinary that a guy who was convicted of fraud and has spoken absolutely erratically. I mean, like sometimes like a 12-year-old, sometimes like a 2-year-old during the last 6, 8, 10 months could actually be reelected president. It's not as if we didn't know him from the first time. Also, we'd seen his behavior before, but it's really a commentary on how bad the Democratic Party is and how condescending it is towards ordinary Americans. I mean, it's just appalling. I mean, what we should be worried about is the weakness of the opposition. If you're a believer in our system of government, the separation of powers and maintaining a kind of balance of power, you should be worried because the Democrats have shown themselves to be so bad, so weak.
Sarah, what do you make of Rick's comments there? A lot of people have talked about this election as a referendum on Donald Trump, but do you think it was actually a referendum on the incumbent government of which Harris is a part of, and indeed the Democratic Party? Donald Trump is very keen to emphasize that it looks like he has won the popular vote. Now, that doesn't it doesn't matter in terms of who actually gets to enter the Oval Office. That's what the Electoral College determines. However, it certainly strengthens your mandate if you've won the popular vote.
Definitely. And this is the first time in 20 years that a Republican's been able to do it. So it's been a while. But I think, yes, in part, it was definitely a referendum on her because she was in office with Joe Biden. She was the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act. She was, Joe Biden said she was there for every key decision. So even that horrific withdrawal from Afghanistan. And she even said on The View that she wouldn't change any of Biden's policies. But I also think it's the issues that they focused on, like abortion, clearly not the driver that they thought it would be. And that's no shock to me because it's kind of a depressing issue if you think about it. And the economy and immigration were the top concerns of everyday people. But I think what Trump does have that Kamala doesn't have, and that's authenticity. And he felt like a real person, like somebody, a real patriot who loves his country and wants to see it succeed again. And I think people also realized they had more money in their pocket when Donald Trump was president. And we hadn't gone through COVID. And there wasn't all this trillions of dollars of spending that the Bidens had pushed through. So I think that that played a large part in it. But also, a lot of people feel like he was targeted unfairly by political opponents and prosecuted for it. And that's just like unfair. It's an un-American value. And I think that people started to warm to him and felt like this guy was truly under attack and they wanted to see the comeback kid.
Rick, what do you make of that comment about lawfare? It is not obvious that it has worked in the Democratic Party's favor. And I think there are big questions now for Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the decisions Biden might make before the end of his term, and what Trump might do as well. Trump has made comments about going after political opponents. Will he roll those back? Could we be in a position where, if it doesn't pan out for Joe Biden, that Donald Trump would pardon his son, Hunter Biden, to really bring the lawfare to an end on both sides?
That's an interesting idea. You should be a diplomat. I find it hard to believe that he'll pardon Hunter Biden.
But should he? And should he? And should both sides recognize that this needs to come to an end in some way?
Well, that would be a nice gesture, I guess. But I'm more concerned about Biden's last 2.5 months, whether he's up to it. I mean, he's so feeble. And he's got a big foreign policy problem with Ukraine is falling apart. I mean, the Russians are advancing. Gaza is being absolutely trampled, destroyed. It's a massacre what's going on right now. And he seems incapable of doing anything about it. He can't say no to Netanyahu. He can't make a gesture that would bring Zelensky and Putin to the negotiating table. He doesn't seem capable of doing anything. I suppose what they're really going to do, because what Biden's is a specialist in, is dispensing patronage. So during the lame duck session, that's when you can get all the judges appointed. That's what they'll get all the federal judges appointed who are held up, who've been nominated. They'll try to do as much as they can for their friends in the last 6 weeks or 2 months of the administration. I'm not looking for him to do anything substantive. I hope he can show up at the inauguration. It's really the thing is, one thing you got to remember about what just happened. I mean, I think Trump is ridiculous. It's hard for me to almost hard for me to take him seriously, but he does appear to take the people who vote for him seriously. The Democrats don't. They're play acting, and the fact that they imposed Kamala Harris on us with no primary, no democracy. I mean, probably 10 people in the upper reaches of the Democratic Party decided she's it. And Biden said, oh, okay, I give up, is disgraceful. And I think people are offended by that, especially when Barack and Michelle Obama come along and say, why aren't you voting? Why aren't you going to vote for her? It's an outrage. Come on, you guys, step up and vote for the black woman. It's condescending, and they feel like they're being taken advantage of or taken for granted. And I think that also backfired terribly. The identity politics part of it backfired horribly, as it should have. Even though I have to admit, I finally voted for her because I couldn't vote for Jill Stein. Jill Stein wasn't on the ballot in New York State, so.
And Rick, we know from our previous podcast together that you landed just in time to cast that vote. So you could do it communally with your fellow Americans in person. I know that matters to you. Sarah, if we look at the early breakdowns in some of those exit polls that make up the results of this election, there's some very interesting information in there. Yes, women did turn out for Harris, but not in the numbers that she needed in order to get this over the line. Yes, abortion mattered, but to your point, Sarah, it did not end up mattering as much as the Democrats needed it to base their campaign pretty much as almost a sole referendum on the abortion issue at the federal level. Donald Trump made inroads with Hispanic voters. He made inroads with Black Americans, and he made inroads with the youth vote. There's some really interesting polling out from Michigan that getting more young voters to turn out for Donald Trump, I think by a 4-point margin, may have really helped him there. But ultimately, this election may have come down to the economy. As you say, it is the number one issue cited in those exit polls. Is the economy stupid? Isn't it always? Perhaps there is a relatively simple narrative to be had here, which is that because of inflation, because of the cost of living crisis, Donald Trump won.
Yes. And also, let's not forget the southern border and immigration and crime going up. And some horrific crimes have happened, unfortunately, by illegals that have crossed the border. There's a huge human trafficking problem. There's a huge drug problem that's ravaging our country. Over 100,000 people die a year from drug overdoses, of which fentanyl is a large part of that. So he really played into that. And his target audience was the apathetic, unlikely voter, mostly male. And he pulled them out. He got them out to vote. And it really kind of reminded me of the Brexit vote, where the person who normally doesn't participate in elections decided that this one was too big of a deal to sit out and had to participate. And I think because they saw their fighter in the ring, he got shot and he got back up again and fight. And then there was a second assassination attempt, or almost an attempt. And they just want to see their guy win. And I do think that, talking about the woke issues, bathrooms and trans men entering female sports. That all plays a role in this too. People just see this as not having much common sense at all and just getting back to a country of law and order. And he's kind of that strong man that will do that or wants to do that. And she just never came across as someone who was comfortable in her own skin. She was thrown from almost obscurity as a very low profile vice president to all of a sudden the presidential candidate almost overnight. And yes, she had a big wave of enthusiasm. And I think it was just relief from the Democrats that they had someone else to go to other than Joe Biden. But, she couldn't keep up. And the Democrats have to have a real inward look at their party. They've got to look to younger generations. But I also think that there were there's potential other candidates that could have stepped up, but they are waiting and keeping their powder dry until 2028.
Well, if I could just add, I think that's done on purpose. I mean, it's the Democratic Party is top down. It's almost Soviet, and
Yep.
they imposed her on us because they knew she would be perfectly reliable. That she's a party hack, and she'll follow orders, and she won't say anything that will rock the boat. And the famous line, the line of the campaign, is the answer to that question. Was it 60 Minutes? Where they asked her, is there anything you would have done different?
The View.
The View. And she said, nothing comes to mind. That nothing comes to mind that you would have done different from Joe Biden in 4 years. It's a stunt, but it's also proof of her party loyalty.
Sarah, I wanna ask you about some of that language in Trump's speech, particularly as it related to immigration. We haven't heard him speak more softly about immigration in quite some time. There was a line where he talked about how we do want immigrants to the United States, but we want them to come legally. He also was talking about unity towards the end, and he said success is what will bring us together. And he says, I've seen that. I saw that in the first term. I think the idea being that when Americans feel more prosperous, when they feel more financially stable, they come together and they're more accepting and they're more unified. And again, a relatively nuanced and thoughtful point from Donald Trump. And this happened in 2016, too, when he gave his acceptance speech. It was a different kind of Trump who then reverted back to his old ways very quickly. So I guess my first question to you is, to what extent can we expect for this Trump to continue? And also, if Donald Trump does bring in some of the policies he's been talking about, including a 20% import tariff on all imports to the United States, Americans are not going to feel successful. They are not going to feel better off. Do we just have to assume that a lot of what was said on the campaign trail isn't going to come to fruition?
Well, I think, Trump likes to say, start the negotiation way out there and then work your way back. And so he'll exaggerate on things or say something really outrageous to get the conversation going. But that's kind of how he starts the art of the deal in his way. So I think you have to take everything with a grain of salt. I think a lot will be determined by who his Treasury Secretary is, economic advisors, etc. So, lots to be seen yet, but he does like tariffs. So I have a feeling that is where the conversation will start. And no, that's not in our free market mindset, which I hold, that is not great. But, we'll have to work with what we have. This is what we have. This is what the American people have elected. And he is a capitalist at the end of the day. And he did cut taxes marvelously when he was in office, which spurred the economy and grew wages. And he's going to make those permanent. They're coming up for review. It's sunsetting. So you can bet that that's going to be a top priority for him to do early in his administration so that, again, we can feel that economic relief soon. And I do think that it is when Americans feel prosperous, but it's also when Americans feel respected in the world and the U.S. military is strong. And I know he wants to take out the diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements in our U.S. military. I know he wants to rebuild and do more defense spending. So it's more of a peace through strength kind of strategy. And I think when that happens, America will feel like it can defend itself. And I think that's really where we're at with all the international crises right now, is that there's just so many domestic fires going on. We need to put those out first before we can extend outside the country.
And Rick, how long do you think this Trump the unifier persona will be with us?
I don't know, a couple of days, maybe. I can't imagine it's going to last. But again, he has an amazingly short attention span. He's not a thoughtful person. And if he raises, just for example, one thing he said he would do is he'd call Putin and Zelensky right away before he takes office. Isn't that what he said? And he promised to do that? Well, I'm actually, or something.
I don't know. I don't remember hearing
that. I think he said he would do it right away. But I'm all for that, actually. I think that would be great. But I also find that as thuggish and as vulgar and so on as Trump is, he's also in some regards kind of timid and conformist. And if he just raises tariffs because it sounds good, without any equivalent or complementary industrial policy, it's not going to work. It's going to hurt the country.
Sarah, when Donald Trump does start to fully form some of those policy ideas and comes up with a more comprehensive agenda, it looks like he's going to have a Republican House and Senate where he can get that legislation through. The Republicans have won the Senate, and it looks like they might even pick up a few seats in the House. The House is not confirmed at time of recording, but for some, this will be a wonderful opportunity to get things done. And it has been said that Donald Trump plans to go in with a more comprehensive agenda than he did last time. For others, this will be incredibly concerning. A lot of Americans, including swing voters, like a divided Congress. They don't want their politicians to be able to do all that much the way the founding fathers intended.
Yes, I think Donald Trump has 2 years with this Congress. So he's better get done what he needs to get done and do it fast. And I'm sure the leadership understands that as well. And also, interestingly, we will have new leadership in the U.S. Senate because, of course, Senator McConnell will be stepping down. There will be a Senate race, or Senate leadership race there, too. So I think the midterms will probably give us a divided government in 2 years' time. So he better get to work. We'll just have to go from there. But he will be green lighted. So his cabinet will easily get through. His judicial appointments will easily get through as well. And if he needs to pass any kind of agreement, like international agreement, that will also be able to get through. And USMCA is coming up for review and renewal in 2026. So 2 pieces of his legacy from the last term are coming up for renewal.
And Rick, this is a test for the Democrats. Of course, all eyes are going to be on the Republican Party. But a lot of their narrative and a lot of their language suggested that if Donald Trump had this kind of power, he would use it for sinister means. There's been a lot of talk of fascism, not talking around it, not using euphemisms, but actual fascism in the past couple of weeks. There's been a lot of talk that if Donald Trump had this kind of power, he would do a federal ban on abortion, something that he insists he will not do. All eyes are on both parties. First of all, what will Donald Trump do? And second of all, if it is again more nuanced, or if he doesn't break the red lines he set out as the Democratic Party suggested, does that need to be part of their refresh and their renewal, the way that they talk about Donald Trump and Republicans more generally?
Well, I happen to believe that the Democrats are perfectly willing to have Trump be president, the leadership, and to work with him to the extent that he can be worked with. Otherwise, why would they have nominated somebody like Kamala Harris? The dictum that I learned from Walter Karp, a great political writer years ago, is that the parties would rather lose with a reliable hack than win with somebody with ideas or independence and so on. So they were prepared to lose with they when they chose her, they were preparing for the possibility of losing. And Schumer and these guys, they know how to work in the minority as well as in the majority, and they'll make deals to the extent that they can. They might be more bellicose about certain things, but on tax cuts, on protecting the privileges of Wall Street, the carried interest, military budget, they're all going to vote for those bills. There's going to be bipartisan support for those bills. If Trump tries to cut Social Security or welfare payments or food stamps, then people will probably scream. But Trump is remarkable because he's broken with traditional republicanism, with traditional Republican values. He's a big spender, and he's not, I don't think, fundamentally hostile to the welfare state. He doesn't care. It's, you print the money and give it away. He's happy to do it. I don't think he doesn't believe in. He's not a fiscal conservative. He's not going to try to rein in spending. He's going to cut taxes, which of course might reignite inflation along with the tariffs. And then what? I don't know. I don't think he knows.
Sarah, this is an interesting point. A lot of economists, especially on the right, have been warning that regardless of who wins, American debt is completely out of control. Of course, it rose substantially under Donald Trump, and it was rising before the pandemic. It wasn't just pandemic spending. He made quick reference to it in his speech this morning. He said, we're going to tackle the debt, we're going to tackle the deficit. But is it empty rhetoric?
I hope not, because we're at 125% of our GDP. It's unsustainable and it's unhealthy, and you can't be a rich country printing like that and spending like that. So he has changed the Republican Party, and now he's won not just the Electoral College, but the popular vote. So he has a mandate. The Republican Party of John McCain and George W. Bush and Mitt Romney is no more. He has confirmed that now with this election. It's not a fringe populist spark. He has now institutionalized this way of thinking. And it will be a battle for traditional Republicans, of which there are still many on Capitol Hill, by the way. And there are many free marketeers and internationalists. So it is a fight within the party. And we see it when Ukraine spending bills come up. And how is he going to unite that wing? How is he going to bring the Nikki Haley voters back, and the more moderates? And it's wait to see. But also the pro-lifers too. I mean, he changed the pro-life platform in the RNC at the RNC convention. He took out stuff on marriage, all of which the moral majority put in like over 40 years ago with Ronald Reagan's election. And it had been growing and building momentum. And he has moderated, or kind of just now ignores the life issue, and says it's to the states now to deal with. He was, in his first presidency, the first president to attend a March for Life rally in his first term. Will he do so in his second term when he's not up for re-election? Does he care about this issue like he has said in the past? And I think many people doubt that, which is very sad to a lot of the core base conservatives of the Republican Party. So there's a lot of inward looking for many traditional conservatives, small state, free market, and pro-life, and how we work and maneuver in this new environment, which doesn't really differ much from the old Democrats and the Blue Dog Democrats from decades ago.
And Rick, my last question to you follows on nicely from Sarah's points there. We have to wait and see if Donald Trump really cares about growing the size of the tent of the Republican Party now that he won't be running for election again. It wouldn't be terribly surprising, given what we know about the president-elect, if that is not his priority. However, if he is thinking more long-term about the MAGA movement, which he began, if he doesn't want to see the Republican Party go in a different direction, and he cares very much about creating a paradigm shift that sticks, he will be thinking about how to bring more voters into the MAGA coalition in the next election, when presumably he has some role in appointing the person who would carry on his policies. How on earth would he go about doing that?
Well, again, I doubt that he's got the interest. He's not a party builder. He's a he's a solo operator. He has contempt for the protocols of party politics. He just doesn't take it seriously, and he doesn't have a long-term vision for anything. The guy who's got a long-term vision, at least for himself, is Vance. Vance is going to be the guy who's busy trying to make the tent bigger. And sorry to be cynical, but when he made that during the debate with Waltz, where he got all pious, he said, he said, I think Waltz said something about how difficult it was for poor women to get abortions. They had to leave the state or whatever. And he goes, well, I have to admit that we Republicans haven't done enough to help families. He didn't even answer the question.
No, but actually, I think that's actually a really big deal that he said that, because in the pro-life movement, it is moving the conversation to supporting the woman and the family, and being there for her, not just being there for the baby per se. It
sounded good, but I don't think he believes it, and I don't think he's serious about it. I really don't believe it. I think it was a cynical thing, because it is cruel to force poor people to have babies that they don't want, or to force them to scrape together the money to fly to another state.
And it's cruel to force them to have abortions. I mean, it's not like
it's not forcing. Nobody's forcing anybody to have abortions.
No, that's not true. Human traffickers do.
Well,
sex traffickers do.
Yeah. I mean, but I do think Vance is the party builder. He's the guy who's going to be trying to enlarge the tent with fake populist inclusiveness.
Well, and you have to remember, his daughter-in-law is now the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. I mean, he does have some commitment to making sure that the Republican Party doesn't rebel against him, and that everyone has their talking points. And passing that new RNC platform took like an hour or less. And usually it's a debate amongst committee members, and everybody had their marching orders, and you had to sign up to it immediately. And that was that.
Well, there's no doubt, for the time being anyway, that the MAGA takeover is complete. We will wait for more networks to break the news, but it does indeed appear to be a Trump landslide. As they break more news, as we get more information, we will be coming back to you on Americano. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Rick. And thanks for listening.